Welcome back to the Bitcoin Treasuries podcast. I'm Tim Kotzman. I'm here with Luke Broyles. Luke, thanks for flying in today.
Happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about your background and the funny kind of you're in and out of New York every once in a while?
Yeah, so I've this is my second time to New York City. First time was about a year ago for a Bitcoin thing. I was here like a third of a day. Now I'm here about half a day to film some things, one of which with you. And yeah, so hopefully by the third visit, I will have spent an entire day in New York City.
Maybe an overnight.
But it is really nice here. You know, a lot of people online say, oh, it's, you know, and I'm not a big city person myself, but you know, like it is a very nice city. It's very beautiful. I got to see the Empire State Building, so that was nice. Got to check that out.
Awesome.
That's one of my favorite buildings, just because it's iconic and the story behind it, and how long it was the world's tallest building is just fascinating to me. How America leapt ahead for a long period of time, and anyway, feats of engineering are always impressive. Now here we are talking about a digital feat of engineering. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Digital Manhattan, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, can you take us back to the early days? And
for me?
How all this kind of developed?
Yeah, so I first heard about Bitcoin 2016, 2017, somewhere in that range. I don't remember the first time I heard about Bitcoin, but I learned more about it. My conclusion was that best case, it's a speculative asset, and worst case, that it's a scam. And I'm not smart enough to know the difference. I don't really care enough to know the difference, so I'm not going to do any research on it, right? I was never firmly anti-Bitcoin. I was just like, it's either something I don't really want or I really don't want. And you know, I would like to think I'm a relatively low risk kind of person, which I know many people might say that sounds crazy when they hear that I'm all into Bitcoin. But you know, I think people that are into Bitcoin understand what I mean. But anyway, all I had to say was that I was into investing. I was into stocks, mutual funds, that kind of thing. I was a big mutual fund guy. I did outperform the market for a few different years. You know, obviously, I mean, like, you know, 1% outperformance. So I thought I was so smart, right? Oh, you know, but S&P did whatever, and the mutual funds I picked, you know, well, they did great. So anyway, but then in the back of my mind, I kept learning about Bitcoin, or at least I thought, you know, I should understand that more. I should understand that more because, like, people are talking about it, and if it is a scam, like, this is going to be a pretty big scam, right? Like a Bernie Madoff level thing. It would be interesting to know about. So I dove in it more. Very interesting. I watched a few different documentaries on it. I read a good bit about it. You know, I knew a decent amount. I knew about the 21 million. I knew about the halving. I knew about all these things, but I didn't understand why couldn't it be duplicated more, all those kinds of things, right? This is all very stereotypical. But then 2020 happened, and of course, like many people, you, me, and probably almost everybody watching this, either, number one, got into Bitcoin because of 2020 or soon after, or number two, they were already into Bitcoin or learning about Bitcoin, but 2020 really accelerated their motivation. And so I was definitely a part of that group, and it freaked me out that we locked down the world, and it was incredibly enraging to me that we shut down the economy, which of course here hurts, right? Like people lose their jobs, people, you know, lose opportunities, right? The economy suffers, and all that's really bad here. But, you know, even more so, I was very upset with the human cost overseas, right? When you shut down America, when you shut down New York City, right? The rest of the world suffers even to a greater degree, right? You know, tens of millions, and the WHO says over 100 million people fell into, you know, various levels of starvation or malnourishment because of the lockdowns and all that. And so it just felt like staring at a freight train, just like a self-induced freight train running to us, right? And, you know, opinions on the lockdown aside, I think most people would probably have the same opinion as me, but whatever the case, it was terrifying to me just how inefficiently we were approaching everything, the disregard to human cost, you know, even for the people that thought for whatever reason the lockdowns were justifiable, the lack of forethought of anybody else who wasn't a US voter, right? It's like, just print the dollars and forget about the human cost, right? You know, but nothing is free. And, you know, as we all know, printing dollars on this side of the equation has a inefficiency cost somewhere else. And sometimes that's an economic cost. In many cases, that's a human cost. And so it was very, very irritating, very upsetting for me during that period of time. And the thing that really alarmed me, of course, was that what I just said, but also that like there just wasn't the same kind of demand, or at least it didn't seem to me there wasn't the same kind of demand for bonds as there were in previous, crises, or it wasn't acting like the way it should, right? And people in the moment talked about this, right? Ray Dalio was one of these people that was talking about it very much. And as someone that has always been a history nerd, even since I was, in elementary school, right? I've always loved history. I've always learned about it. And, I didn't understand the bond market, nearly as much, in 2020 as I would say I would like to think I do now. But even at the time, I remember thinking like, okay, something seems odd. It seems like that the better well-read in history certain investors and people are, the more concerned they are about this. And it does seem pretty concerning. Like, we shut down the world and I don't know a lot. I'm just a, kid, right? I've never worked at a hedge fund. I've never, I don't have all this experience, but it's like, why is it, none of it made sense to me. So I thought about it more and I realized that the conclusion came to me that, it's because it's a pyramid scheme, essentially. It's because we have to keep printing forever. And and it all started to connect, right? I knew about inflation. I remember when, I remember the first time I saw the national debt clock when I was like only 7 or 8 trillion or whatever this is in the late 2000s. At the beginning of the wars in the Middle East, right? And now it's crazy that here I am, not even halfway through being 26, like young, and now we're 3-4 times that number. Like we'll be 5 times by the time I'm 30, we'll be 5 times the national debt than when I was in elementary school or middle school or whatever. This is crazy to me. But I realized over the course of 2020 the inevitability of the problem that we were facing with this ballooning cost and this problem with our political currency. We just keep diluting and diluting and diluting, and we're getting less juice for the squeeze. And then you throw in a curveball like a more or less self-induced lockdown. What happens when the next event is not self-induced? What happens when it's legitimate, right? A lockdown you could turn off pretty quickly if, it really hit the fan, right? But what if there's a war? What if there's something like that? And so just thinking through all those things and thinking about history and learning more about monetary history, it became pretty clear to me this is an inevitable problem. So I came across Bitcoin, wanted to learn more about Bitcoin. And the thing that really caught me about Bitcoin, where I never really looked back, trying to find the answer here and there, whatever. But the thing that really made me not look back was thinking about that human cost. And there were a few Bitcoiners, in particular, their content I highly appreciate for helping me put those two things that were frustrating me very much together, right? On one side, being very frustrated that why don't more people seem to at least be asking the question about why the safe haven assets are not acting safe in, the greatest economic crisis of, my lifetime so far, right? This is what I've been told for years and now it's not happening. So connecting that with my frustration of human cost and realizing, Bitcoin is a better engineered solution and it preserves purchasing power. And there are lots of charitable ways to help people around the world, especially those in less fortunate circumstances. There are plenty of ways to help people like that. I'm somebody that's been on mission trips and been happy to see various efforts in different places of the world. And I'm very grateful for that. But it's very frustrating that these are not long-term solutions. Without getting too much in the details, one of the handful of countries I did mission work in and supported, I raised money for, made a documentary for this organization, right? One of those organizations, in Mali, Africa, they poured in all the support. They had shipping containers of resources and support, coming in, wonderful things, right? Food, shelter, building materials, right? Water for digging, materials for digging wells, all these wonderful things. But like 3 or 4 years later, like terrorist groups came in and took it all, right? And so you can do all kinds of charitable work to help people, but at the end of the day, if you have a honeypot of a centralization of power, you have a very real growing incentive for somebody to take it over, either internally with some sort of civil or internal hostile takeover, or something external, like in this case with the terrorist groups, right? And so really thinking through like, what if the most efficient way to help the most people possible in the present moment and in the far future is to help people have a more efficient way of preserving the purchasing power and reducing that honeypot. Bitcoin, I don't think will reduce it entirely, but to me, when that idea really caught a hold of me, that's when I more or less overnight decided, like, yeah, this is Bitcoin thing is what I'm doing. Like, it pretty quickly to me became apparent that Bitcoin is not something I need to invest in to preserve my purchasing power. This is like its own nation. It's a nation that is fighting a world war with every other country in the world, except it doesn't have any guns or tanks, and it's winning, even though it's very small. Like it's winning, and I'm like, oh, this is like a black hole versus a planet kind of thing. This is like a before and after kind of thing. And so anyway, I've not really looked back, and that's why I'm in Bitcoin today, because we were talking about this over lunch earlier, but people is really my favorite thing about Bitcoin. Number go up is nice, more dollars is nice or whatever, right? Seeing numbers go up. But at the end of the day, like, what's the point of the money if you don't have people to share it with? What's the point of traveling to new places without meeting new people when you go to those new places, right? Mm-hmm. So, I love Bitcoin, and more importantly, I love and care about the people supporting for and advocating for Bitcoin when Bitcoin desperately needs them, because I genuinely believe that every single person in Bitcoin today, whether they realize it or not, has a tremendous impact on the future world, right? I genuinely believe that Bitcoin, either by accelerating positive changes of heightened efficiency in the future, or by disincentivizing self-induced catastrophes of the future, let's say. Like, I firmly believe that Bitcoin's probably going to save hundreds of millions of lives over the next century or so, right? Like, it's really, the math really isn't that absurd, right? If you just go from a 1% annual reduction of hunger to a 1.5%, or if you just reduce the probability of another 2020 kind of lockdown event from X% to half of that, right? If you just tweak a couple vague assumptions, and of course the error bars are massive and nobody can know, but my point is that if Bitcoin is going to save many lives, or at least prevent many needless deaths in the future, then every single person in Bitcoin today is essentially advocating not only for their own self-sovereignty, not only for the sake of their own future families and their own multi-generational wealth, but in effect, this is the greatest humanitarian effort of the modern era, arguably of the entirety of human history. And these orange Bitcoin nerds going on these podcasts and smash buying and tweeting about Michael Saylor or whatever, it's like these odd misfits and weirdos are some of the highest integrity, highest conviction, highest passion people in the world. So it's a thrill being a part of it.
How did you get involved with Jeff and Camp Nakamoto and any of those projects?
Yeah, so when I started posting about Bitcoin, it was really a dramatic few days and week for me, and to be honest, the momentum has never really stopped. It's been hard to keep up. But I started posting about Bitcoin out of a passion to help some friends of mine understand Bitcoin, right? Because, they thought I was, a part of this thing. It was like, a scam, or, and it's understandable, right? Like, again, me, you, and probably almost every single person watching this, ignored, rejected, or mocked Bitcoin at least for years, in some cases a decade or more before they figured out Bitcoin, right? So I made, my first piece of content, my very first one, I thought was going to get like 5 likes and 10 people would see or whatever. Like, who's going to listen, to what I have to say? It's not about that, right? I made it to share with my friends, and they never listened. They never really bought Bitcoin, but people on Bitcoin Twitter, now X, loved it, right? And one of the first people to support was Jeff and the mass adoption team out in Boston, Massachusetts. It's a wonderful Bitcoin event. It's the largest Bitcoin only event in all of New England, as far as I'm aware, and as far as they're aware too. And so anyway, I went out there to one of the meetups. It was the first Bitcoin event I had traveled to. I went to a couple local ones in previously, but this was the first one I traveled to go to, that I was invited to speak at. It was a wonderful time, and they've become good friends over the last couple of years. And about 18 months ago, we were having a discussion of how so much effort went into putting together this conference in the middle of Boston, right downtown Boston. And, it's a lot of expense. It's hard to get people to show up, right? The costs add up for people attending, all these things. And at the same time, it's hard to get speakers, because a lot of speakers in Bitcoin, like you, like me, and like many other people that, hop around, we like to be in person, but the reality is that City after city, hotel after hotel gets a little much. People want to be outside, right? Bitcoin and Bitcoin number go up is to help people do the things that they want. And for me and for I know many other people, both people, speaking of Bitcoin publicly and people that just want to go and hang out with other Bitcoiners, like being outside is something that's pretty important. And so anyway, the concept came, well, why don't we just have a little mini Bitcoin citadel for a couple of days, right? So, we have this private island for 3 days with the 100 to 150 Bitcoiners we're going to have and lots of wonderful speakers. You, me, Larry Lepard, who else is coming? Texas Slim, Michelle Weekly, BJ Dichter, a lot of virtual guests like Natalie Brunel, Mark Moss could be there in person, James Lavish. So, lots of people are really happy to sign on really early, which was something really meaningful for us. And so ultimately the reason why we wanted to put this event together specifically, or just more in general, I love having Bitcoin events in general, is because I think these people in Bitcoin today are really special. I care about all of them and I want to see everyone succeed. And I think we are at a very unique point because I think we're in this unique stage of the internet where you can talk to anybody, right? You can message anybody, right? You can DM, whoever. You can DM Michael Saylor or whatever, right? But, we don't know what's going to happen in the near future. This is something I talk about a lot online. It was actually the premise of that first thread or article I posted years ago, was that we have less in common with the future than the past. I think the same thing's true today. I think we have less in common with the near future than the ancient past, whether it comes to Bitcoin price and Bitcoin cycles, which I know we want to talk about, or even if it comes to interpersonal communication on the internet, right? In 5 years, maybe not even that, it's going to be hard to know, is the person you're talking to, texting with, emailing, even on the phone with, how do you know that person is actually who you're talking to and not an AI, right? And the only way to verify that is if you have your own AI that can filter through and determine algorithmically if that's an AI, right? So at some point, I think it's going to be pretty difficult. Maybe not forever. I'm not saying, it's going to be this chasm forever, but I think that's already here for many people. A lot of my clients at the Bitcoin Advisor, obviously the more Bitcoin somebody has, the greater the honeypot is. And so the greater the attacks become. And for those that, have a very significant number of Bitcoin, it's quite remarkable the extent to which those attacks come. And I think, for people today, for Bitcoiners today, I think it's really important to start thinking about that because sooner or later, hopefully you're gonna see your stack double. You'll see the Bitcoin price 5x, and before you know it, you're gonna go from a relatively obscure kind of person in the eyes of scammers and hackers to all of a sudden, you're a relatively high person thing. So you combine all these things where you have a core Bitcoin community, people that are very passionate, that have an annual rate of paranoia growing faster than Bitcoin, right? Because you have the Bitcoin CAGR plus all of that mental angst with it, right? So if you have these people who care about, and in general, they're getting more paranoid. In general, they're retreating more from online life. And also with AI in general, it's getting harder to discern what's real online. I think these in-person events are really important. In the present, yes, and I think so in the future too. And so with Camp Nakamoto specifically, in October 2025, and hopefully we have it be an annual thing. If people like it, I think people are going to love it. That one's a family-friendly event, and I think it's going to be a really good time. And it's really nice to not only shake somebody's hand and meet them in person, but become a friend. And you become a friend by doing things together. And so it's nice to do things together other than just press like or repost online.
Absolutely. Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp leads this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of one institution or complex private keys, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a segregated, cold storage, multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent, institutional-grade custodians. No single custodian can move funds by themselves, providing an unprecedented level of security that traditional custody solutions simply can't match. Protected by a $100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, all transactions are fully auditable on-chain, never rehypothecated, and executed only at your explicit direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all times. Beyond custody, OnRamp delivers comprehensive Bitcoin financial services, including lending, trading, inheritance planning, IRAs, and more. OnRamp functions as your private banking partner, coordinating key holder activity, removing technical burdens, and providing a personalized, trust-minimized experience tailored to your specific wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps secure generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. Visit onrampbitcoin.com today to learn more, sign up, or book a free consultation with their team of Bitcoin custody experts. Hey guys, today's episode is brought to you by Stampseed. If you're in cold storage, you know how important it is to protect your seed phrase. That's why I recommend you head over to stampseed.com and check it out for yourself. This seed phrase storage device is one solid piece of titanium. There are no loose pieces, and you can hammer your seed phrase in letter by letter. When you go to stampseed.com, use promo code TIM15 for a 15% discount across the website. That's TIM15. Join us at the Wynn in Las Vegas, February 23rd through the 26th, 2026 for Bitcoin for Corporations. Use code KOTZ when you grab your tickets at strategy.com, and we'll see you there. What is Bitcoin Advisor? What are you guys doing over there? Can you kind of dive into all of those details of how it started, maybe when you were getting involved, the present, and anything you can share about the future?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Well, it's not my company. I'm very loud and passionate about it. So a lot of people think it's my company. It's not my company. Peter Dunworth is one of the three partners of the company. The company was started in 2016. Overlook $1 billion of client assets, right? Obviously, a larger and larger portion is becoming Bitcoin, right? Peter and the team have combined decades of experience. Now we got 40 people on the team. I was the first American on the team, and I'm the youngest person on the team, so I'm very proud about both of those facts. And so, obviously, the rate at which people are coming in, the rate at which they're wanting to buy more Bitcoin, that's the problem we're trying to solve. We try to help people increase their Bitcoin stack. And the way I like to put it is that there's two primary ways to do that, right? First, you decrease your risk with what you currently have. And second, you figure out ways to maximize taking advantage of the opportunity cost in front of you, right? So anyway, all to say is that, I suppose one could think of it similar to a traditional financial advisor combined with the IT specialist and, Treasury's perspective as well, right? So really, the whole point of the service is be the one-stop shop for service and helping people, right? Because what a lot of people, especially when they have a significant, the more Bitcoin somebody has, the more our service makes sense, right? Typically for people with a tenth of a Bitcoin, we have plenty of clients with those amounts of money, but really it's when people have a Bitcoin, 10 Bitcoin, 100 Bitcoin, a couple hundred Bitcoin. That's where the value add actually goes up, because the more Bitcoin somebody has, the more competition there is, the more of a honeypot they are. And so the more urgent it is to decrease that risk, and the more opportunity cost there is, right? The more money somebody has, the more opportunity cost there is to be able to use that money to find a way to increase their stack, right? So all I say is that for Bitcoiners, there is this good problem of a hyper-competitive product landscape where you have company A offering a product and they would like you to use it because it's a great, wonderful product. You got this other company, right? You have all these companies telling you, hey, this is good, and they all have their own internal service operations, and oftentimes that's wonderful and that's fantastic. But really what we do is we enter that conversation with people where our alignment with clients is not to pitch them any given specific product, not to recommend them any specific product or financial service by any one of these companies. Really, our goal to align with clients is to be a tech neutral advisor and service to that person with the aligned incentive that we want to help you end up with more Bitcoin 12 months from now than what you currently have, right? That's why we don't charge by the hour. That's why we don't charge by the referral or commission of any, of the product we sell or whatever, right? We charge based upon a percentage of whatever's in hand, right? So, for example, let's say somebody has 100 Bitcoin. Our annual rate, starts at 1%. It goes down to 0.5%. So on average, it's about 0.61%. So, on average, somebody has 100 Bitcoin. They're paying us 0.6%. So about 60 million sats. And, in return, our only goal is, over the course of that year, help them reduce their downside risk by at least that amount, and or ideally both, also increase that potential upside by at least that amount. That is something that we achieve pretty consistently. Our average client increases their Bitcoin stack by about 70% in the first 12 months of joining us. Their Bitcoin denominated net worth. That's really important to note because that's really what matters, not the fiat number. And, that number obviously is slanted a bit upwards, right? I've got a handful of clients that have increased their stack, 200-300% or so over the course of the first year. And I'll get into how we do that in just a moment. But, lots of other people, maybe they only increase their stack 20% or, 18% or, 55 or whatever it is percent, right? But at the end of the day, like, as long as we're consistently helping people end up with at least more than 0.6% more Bitcoin over the course of that, it's a exceedingly low hurdle rate for us just because the opportunity is so great with helping Orange Pill loved ones, helping their businesses, their LLCs, their companies, their, all their employees, whatever it is, helping all them get into Bitcoin. Oftentimes, one of the biggest helps is helping the partner or the spouse or the kid or the dad get on board, right? I often say that, once we've helped the person increase their stack, then, the next thing is how do we help, what is the low-hanging fruit, right, in your immediate circle, because that indirectly, affects you, right? A lot of people have parents that they want to buy Bitcoin, but they don't. But, keep in mind that a lot of that Bitcoin is going to probably end up going to you, and then that's going to go to your kids, right? So there are all kinds of ways in family dynamics to help people increase Bitcoin. But where I think the opportunity is going to be in coming years are with the various kinds of products coming. And I think that that's going to accelerate and surprise Bitcoiners really rapidly. I think we're seeing the cycle play a little different. And I personally think the cycle is going to extend. And I think that no small part of that is going to be because of the products coming to market. The ones, of course, that people are most excited about are Bitcoin Treasury loans and Bitcoin mortgages, Bitcoin HELOCs, all those kinds of things. And so what we do to interact with clients is, basically we have our team of 40 people in Bitcoin Advisor. And of course, that team grows over time, as qualified individuals, desire to join us. So basically what people are paying for is that every year you're getting a team putting in 40 years of effort, learning and obsessing over what's going to be the best fit for any given person on any given circumstance, no matter what country you're from, no matter what level of net worth, you are, right? There's 100 different good Bitcoin products out there. Pretty soon there's going to be 1,000, there's going to be 5,000, right? And so it's our goal to figure out, given for this person, of what their goals are, what their risk tolerance is, or this, that, the other, how do we help them get to this goal of whatever it is? For some people, it's how to retire 3 years earlier. How do I increase my stack over the next couple years, right? How do I, increase my income to reduce my hours at work by half? Everyone has a different goal. And so really you can kind of think of us as kind of like the driving instructor. And this is a very good business model for us because there's only more and more models of cars and they're all competing with each other. They're doing all the market research. They're doing all the research and development. They're hyper competing to service the client. But instead of them having to spend extra money on marketing and promoting their services, they just interact with us because they know we have the people that, number one, want their products. And number two, we can help educate clients to understand these products. And, there is a lot of trust involved, build relationships with people, over time. It's a very long-term kind of commitment, right? Long-term vision. And, really you build a relationship with people and you try to help people understand the trade-offs of each different one. So I'm happy to talk about some of the products coming down. I think are going to be really exciting. But yeah, long story short is that what we are a tech agnostic, multi-jurisdictional service to clients. And so that includes multi-sig self-custody with zero single point of failure. That includes inheritance planning. That includes now Bitcoin Treasury loans. That's now available. That's available for Bitcoin Advisor clients, which we could talk about that. I think you would like to hear about that given our mutual passion of Bitcoin Treasury companies. And then pretty soon it's going to be Bitcoin mortgages, Bitcoin HELOCs, Bitcoin everything. And I think it's going to be really competitive. And so basically we help people go from what's the good product to what's the great product.
Awesome. Do you want to dive into Bitcoin Treasury loans? I haven't heard anyone name them Bitcoin Treasury loans, which I think is very fitting.
Yes. So this is something I'm very excited about. This is something our whole team's very excited about. Works for a very long time. I think it's going to be a really big deal because we're seeing Bitcoin enter its vertical phase in terms of construction, right? We're here in New York City, so this is very fitting, right? Bitcoin is like Manhattan is in the mid 1600s, whatever. Michael Saylor, is the first hotel. Like finally we're seeing the underlying dirt, right? Bitcoin layer 1, we're finally seeing it be worth enough that we're actually seeing these treasury companies explode, right? And I think you agree, and I think everyone probably watching this agrees that I think we're at the very beginning of that. And the interesting new thing with that is that now we're pricing in a different direction, right? Even just a few years ago, people were mostly pricing in fiat terms, right? And most of the world still is when they look at Bitcoin. They're not looking at as, the dollar going down. They're still seeing a number go up, right? But for Bitcoiners who are denominating their success, not dependent on how many dollars did they make, but how many extra Bitcoin did they make this year? For those kinds of people, that's where the Bitcoin Treasury loan comes in handy. So this product, and again, this is not something that the Bitcoin Advisor is making. I want to make it very clear, we're not a financial services company. We're just helping people connect with these products as they come to market. But this, as an example, it's a 5%, 5-year loan with no margin call and zero counterparty risk for the purpose of taking a Bitcoin denominated loan and finding a way to increase their Bitcoin stack. So as an example, like literally right now, like today with, more market turmoil and fear and panic, right? What this means is that this is a very tax efficient way to convert Bitcoin equity into different kinds of equity. One of the biggest problems that very wealthy people in Bitcoin have, right? People with, 20, 50, 100 or more Bitcoin. One of the biggest problems they have is that they want to have some exposure to, a Bitcoin Treasury company or a private Bitcoin startup that they've been invited into. A lot of my clients, whether it's from me or someone on the team bringing it to their attention or they independently already are interested, they want to invest in Bitcoin startups. They want to invest in, pre-IPO treasury companies or, tech companies or whatever it is, right? But the problem they have is that what do? Do you sell the Bitcoin? Well, if you sell the Bitcoin, you're going to take a tax hit, right? You're going to have that event, right? And so that's not the worst idea in the world, but you're already starting out, 20 or 30, whatever your tax rate is, percent behind the ball, right? So that's not ideal. And then the other option that you could do, well, you could take that Bitcoin and you could go to one of these collateralized lending platforms, right? And so let's say, for the sake of example, somebody has 100 Bitcoin and they're like, I'm willing to risk 20% of my Bitcoin, with this counterparty equity, whatever it is. So they take their 20 Bitcoin, they put it on this lending platform, they borrow 10 Bitcoin against it, right? 50% loan to value. The problem is you're paying double-digit interest rate, you have the origination fee, and most importantly, like I always say, opportunity cost is your biggest expense. You're only getting half that capital back to be able to reinvest into the whole purpose why you're doing it in the first place, right? And so the problem is that you inherently limit that upside, and it's really a very expensive way to do that. And so what the Treasury loan does is it means that you can take that 20 Bitcoin, you can get 95% lend instead of 50%. You can take that money, capture more of the opportunity cost. You're able to defer taxes up to that 5-year period. And because it's all self-custodied, you don't have to factor in that risk, right? A lot of people ask me, Luke, should I use collateralized lender A or B? This one's 14%, that one's 12%. And with all due respect, I say to those people very often, I have this conversation all the time, is that, you got to realize that extra couple percent and that interest rate, it doesn't matter, right? The risk is you're giving up the sovereignty of that amount of Bitcoin, right? And I am pro ETF, I am pro the financialization of Bitcoin traditional system, right? Obviously, I don't think that these entities are going to go bust in the same way like, a la FTX. But at the end of the day, you have to assign a non-zero percentage to the risk of these things blowing up, right? I love these companies and they're wonderful, right? I've used some of them myself. Many of my clients use them. But even if there's only a 5% chance that let's say over the duration of your loan, especially if we're talking about a 5-year period, let's say it's a 5% chance that you putting up this Bitcoin has a rehypothecation issue or margin call issue, right? What happens if we actually do have a Bitcoin bear market or a flash crash like we saw in 2020? That's a big risk to factor in. So even if it's only a rate of 5% over that 5-year period, you got to keep in mind that you're adding that risk not only to the capital you've borrowed, that 10 Bitcoin you've cashed out, but you also have to add it to the over collateral, right? And so my point is that, this is one example of a product that's not for everyone, right? This is for, this is a sophisticated product for people that understand denominating net worth in Bitcoin terms and are pricing their opportunities in terms of Bitcoin. If you're pricing opportunities in terms of fiat dollars and you're trying to use, like as an example, this product to trade between dollars, that's really not going to work. But for people that are trying to find a way to have a tax deferred way of a low interest, relatively long amortization, it's a way to take advantage of the mispricings or market inefficiencies with various treasury companies and be able to use that in a way, eliminating relative risk as much as possible. The absolute risk, of course, is always, risking buying to equity, right? That's the absolute risk, right? The product obviously doesn't, solve that problem or the negative trade-offs there, but the whole point is reduce those relative risks, right? If you can reduce the tax concerns, the margin call concerns, the counterparty and self-custody concerns, all of a sudden you can help people have more sleep and peace of mind at night, and lowering the risks of that given trade by a very significant percentage. And the end story of why this all really matters is that the goal is get more Bitcoin, right? So that's a basic explanation of that. And that's a very niche product. I think the even bigger product though, and I think one that is more understandable and straightforward, is the Bitcoin mortgage. People very soon will be able to take 100% of their Bitcoin, of the real estate equity and convert it into Bitcoin at an interest rate shockingly low, let's say, on a 15-year term, right? And so right now, a lot of people have equity in their house that, maybe they want to do, but it's, the term's not that long, or the payment's really high, or, it's like you can only do up to 50, 60% LTV, especially if you're doing HELOC. But with the Bitcoin mortgage, all of a sudden, if you're able to do up to 100% lend on your real estate equity, to then have a combined LTV of 50%, ironically, you can gain 3 times the Bitcoin exposure for only doubling your LTV, right? Or you can get 50% more Bitcoin exposure for only a 20% increase in your LTV or whatever, right? So, point being that I think Bitcoin cycles have fundamentally changed. And I think, these products, and more importantly, what's coming down the line, are a really useful way to understand that capital is going to be leaving the fiat system and entering Bitcoin via all these refinances. And once it's in Bitcoin world, held by Bitcoiners that are pricing in terms of Bitcoin, I think it's just going to stay in that world. And I don't think it's going to have to go back and forth like it used to in previous cycles, causing those, 95 to 80% drawdowns.
Makes sense.
Sorry, that was a lot.
It's great. Where can people find you and the firm online? What's the best way to connect?
They can email me. They can go to our website. They can text me directly. Book a call with me. Happy to have the conversation. Or they can go to my YouTube channel, Luke Broyles, Broyles, last name, or my phone number. It's posted online, and my email address, so people could feel free to reach out to me. But more so than people working with me or this or that or whatever, the thing I really care about is I want to see as many Bitcoiners as possible hold on to what they have. Because I genuinely believe that probably a very serious percentage of the people currently in Bitcoin today are going to lose most of what they have. You're going to lose it because of mistakes made, or improper risk tolerance, improper self-custody, improper inheritance planning. There's a reason why 90 or whatever percent of people that win the lottery are, superstar athletes. Like, there's a reason why most of them, lose that money, right? And granted, Bitcoiners in general think about money a lot and plan for the future, right? But even if we do 3 times, 5 times better than the average person as a success rate, like, I think our assumption should still be that we should have less in common in the future than the past, and probably most Bitcoiners are going to lose most of their Bitcoin. And the people that don't have a zero-sum mindset and the people that view opportunities as growth opportunities and not as a finite win-lose scenario, I think those are going to be the people that explode in Bitcoin-denominated net worth and do really well. I think Michael Saylor is an example of that, of playing a non-zero game and of hyper acceleration. And now we're seeing ample Treasury companies copy that strategy. And that's what I like about Bitcoin, is that everybody can win. As Michael Saylor says, it's the one game everybody can win, right? The casino is bet in our favor. So that's my encouragement for everybody, is focus on opportunity cost and focus on a growth mindset.
Awesome. Luke, thanks so much for joining us today.
Happy to.
This episode is brought to you by Arch Lending, the premier provider of crypto-backed loans designed for both individual and institutional investors. At Arch, your digital assets work for you without selling them. Arch offers flexible loan options tailored to your needs. Backed by industry leaders like Morgan Creek Digital, Castle Island Ventures, and Galaxy Ventures, Arch Lending is setting a new standard in crypto-backed lending. Are you ready to unlock the potential of your crypto assets? Visit archlending.com to learn more and configure your loan today. Are you looking for comprehensive analytics on corporate Bitcoin adoption? Strategy Tracker delivers real-time insights into how companies are executing their Bitcoin strategies completely free. Monitor NAV premiums, cost basis performance, and track how corporate Bitcoin treasuries perform against the market. Upgrade to premium for just $3.99 a month and unlock exclusive benefits like detailed market rankings, real-time trading volume analysis, and advanced performance metrics for corporations embracing Bitcoin. Apply code KOTZ at checkout for 100% off your first month of premium. Strategy Tracker is your essential tool for measuring the effectiveness of corporate Bitcoin strategies. Visit strategytracker.com and gain the analytical edge in understanding the Bitcoin Treasury phenomenon.